5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we are live. Whenever you are, wherever you are, thank you for joining the Design of Everyday People, where I talk to senior designers from all over the world and where you get to ask them anything. So get your typing fingers ready and to join the conversation. And just as we go, you can drop as many questions in the comments, whether you're on YouTube or LinkedIn, and we'll try and answer them as we go. And I'll try to weave it into the conversation. Like always, we want to make this session as interactive as possible. If I can find the buttons, let me know where you're tuning in from. FYI, for the folks out there, I'm actually in a hotel room in Bangkok, which I spoke to our guest earlier. Just be like, yeah, pretty random. So cool. But yeah, let me know where you guys are listening and drop an emoji or the city. Without further ado, let's get it kicked off. This is the Design of Everyday People.
It sound right, boy.
All right, we've had our first person come in on YouTube. Shabin, hello, bro. How are you doing? So, yeah, welcome to today's live stream, how to use behavioral psychology in UX. We always start with the introduction first, and I'll go first. I'm Chris, the founder of UX Playbook, but before that, a self-taught designer struggling to get into UX. And now I spend most of my time helping designers navigate a fuzzy UX career with UX Playbook, from building your first portfolio to leading your first design team. But that's enough about me. You guys already know where I'm from. We have some other folks coming in. Christy from Cincinnati, Ohio. Amazing. How are you doing? Hello from California. Oh, that's early for you guys. So well done for tuning in like bright and early, probably starting your day while I'm wrapping up mine. But today I'm joined by Ben McCarthy-Jones, leading design at a global data and technology company Experian, founder of UXologist, which we'll speak all about later. So let's just get Ben out and see how he's doing. How are you doing, Ben?
Hey, Chris. Good. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thanks for having me, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely, man. For the folks that don't know you, I sort of gave a brief introduction, but why don't you go ahead and tell the folks on this call about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so as Chris said, I'm Ben. I have been in design for good over 15, 16 years. I lead, as he said, product design for a few of the domains at Experian. So yeah, I've become a bit of a, I suppose, fanatic around psychology the last few years. And that's kind of gratefully why I'm here today as well, to kind of help educate others in it as well. But yeah, I've built a business around it as well, which is a UXologist, to help kind of educate people into the importance of understanding behavioural psychology, essentially understanding people, which is the most exciting thing. Yeah, that's me. Otherwise, love tattoos, you can see, love a bit of metal. Yeah, I'm a just happy-go-lucky guy, so good to be here.
Oh, thanks, man. Thanks. Yeah, I just want to remind the audience as they listen, you can go ahead and again drop your comments about what we're speaking about, because sometimes we forget, our train of thought. So just leave them in the comments. And this session is always recorded because everybody asks, and I feel remiss if I didn't say it. It's on YouTube or LinkedIn. You can go ahead and just search Chris from UX Playbook. But anyway, okay, cool. How many tattoos do you have? Have you covered your whole body, Ben?
It's just the arm. It's just the arm at the minute. I mean, it started up here, and then within the same session, I was like to the tattooist, "What would this look like as a sleeve?" My girlfriend, my wife, I should say, blimey, that was great. She has got full sleeve, but we keep talking about covering the body. It's the neck will be covered, the rest of the arms will be covered. It's an addiction. It's absolute addiction.
Oh god,
Have you got any
amazing.
tattoos?
Well, I do not have any tattoos. I wanted to get one when I was younger and never went through with it, and then I just forgot about it. So clearly I wasn't as into it as you were. But
Probably the right decision. That would be that tattoo you look back on and think, why? Why did I get that on?
Yeah, it'll be like Ed Sheeran, just like looking at his arm, being like, "Oh no, what happened?"
I'd say Ed Sheeran would be looking at like past girlfriends' names, but I swear he's just had like one girlfriend and now his wife. So at least he's got away with that.
Yeah, exactly. So let me give the folks on here just an introduction and context for this event. Well, we in design know that every user interaction is based on psychology, but actually a lot of junior designers or even mid-levels kind of ignore this. And you might wonder why. Well, maybe because it's too complex to apply practically, maybe a bit too academic for real world design, or something you just pick up naturally, only relevant for conversion optimizations. That could be some of the reasons, and that's kind of why I got Ben here to speak about behavioral psychology, because a lot of the work he does with UXologists is right about this topic, right? So we're going to touch on 3 things today, and hopefully many more, like Ed Sheeran's tattoos. Must know UX psychology principles, how to design for behaviors and biases, small tweaks to make a huge impact on your product. Okay, so let's get into the weeds of why users do what they do, and more importantly, how to design for it. So let's start with the thing, like the question in the room for the folks who maybe are like, psychology, design, not sure. Why is it important, Ben, that designers sort of understand and study psychology when it comes to design?
Yeah, great question. I think the easiest way, I was thinking about this morning actually, and I think when we think about what we do as designers, we do a lot of research, which is great, and we try to understand what our customers need from our product. But we are actually very narrow-minded in that sense that we just think about what the customers do in our product, and that's it. But behavioral psychology is understanding the person as a whole. It is thinking about, what are their different needs in a day-to-day life, and what brought them to the product, and how does that product fit into their everyday life as well. So essentially, it's just expanding your awareness and understanding of a customer, and ultimately gets you out of that a kind of narrow-minded thinking of then suddenly thinking, okay, yeah, I'm not just targeting a notification, because we know they're on a train at 8 o'clock in the morning or something. It's more like, okay, actually, what does the rest of their day look like? Like, when are they relaxing? When are they most busy that they don't want to be bombarded with this kind of stuff? And, when do they actually most need this product because of the way they're thinking at certain times of the day, not just specifically what they're doing. So yeah, it really opens a lot of additional opportunities and a lot of additional growth as well.
Do you think the best products in the world take into account behavioral psychology? And do you have some examples of like your favorite products that you're just like, oh my God, they just nailed it?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose so. There's some that take it to the extreme. The one we're all aware of is going to be Duolingo. That is dark psychology in so many ways, and especially on an emotional level, when you see your app icon change to an angry bird because you've not done your language lessons for the day, like that's really kind of honing in on that, loss aversion of, oh God, I'm really missing out here, and this thing is angry because it's happening. And yeah, they do a lot. They do a hell of a lot of gamification, but they do a lot of social interaction and bringing people in. But there's so many aspects. It's hard to kind of pinpoint something they're not doing from a psychology perspective. And I think to your question there around like who's doing it well and who's not doing it well, Duolingo is an example of both ends. Like they do certain things really well from a psychological perspective, but there are other things they're doing that actually misuse psychology. And if anything, of the fact are losing customers. So, when you're getting those notifications from Duolingo to say, what's up? Like, why are you not playing with me kind of thing? And I really sarcastic way. Oh, I'm sure it's humorous and everything, but when you've seen that a few times in a couple of days, it's kind of like, no, I'm done with this. That's not fair. So yeah, they're a really interesting one. They do a lot. I think generally there's outwardly not many companies talk about the psychology behind the product. I think there are some that do talk about it, but I'd love to hear more companies talk about how they've considered psychology, because when I've done a lot of different case studies and I've seen where psychology is in practice, I can see there's been some thought there. I think I saw one the other day with Spotify with, I think I was testing cancelling my account from a premium account. And the copy they used was something like, are you sure you want to lose out on, ad-free listening and thousands of downloaded items and that kind of thing? And it really generally pulled on something that, made my experience better. So it wasn't just are you sure you want to cancel this? It actually kind of like pulled on a good reason for why I wouldn't. So I think that was a really good example where clearly they thought about it. They thought about the psychology of the copy. But yeah, I think there's still, as people might see from the case studies I've done, UXologist and other resources as well that do it. But yeah, there's a lot of places where people just miss some of those key points of, if you'd have just thought about it like this, it could have been a ton better.
Right. And Virginia, thanks for joining. But she said design is psychology, right? And
yeah,
absolutely, completely agree. It's human behavior and understanding how we can sort of bake into considerations. And as you said, to your point, it could be used for good and bad, right? People not churning from your product, people using it more, whatever metric that the teams want to move, they could sort of use some of those psychology levers and pull on it. So whether or not you're ethically doing this, that's potentially a different discussion, but psychology is involved with tampering with these levers. Are there sort of like must know sort of psychology principles that like every designer could kind of like think about or use in their day-to-day work? What are some of the basic ones you see that people should know?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think the thing I'll start with is that you said it at the start as well. Some people think about psychology and they think, why would I consider that in my design work? But actually, most people consider psychology in their design work. They just don't use the scientific terms and, kind of don't go into the kind of deepness of it. As an example, we can be looking at a screen and someone can be saying, there's just way too much information on this. I feel like we know people feel overwhelmed with that. That's just generally about cognitive distortion and things. Just being overwhelmed. Like that is a general piece of psychology there. And people do talk about these things, and it doesn't matter if people are using the psychology term for it, as long as they're talking about the aspect of mentality and how people think about things. That's important. But I think in terms of the big ones that I've found in any psychology case study, I think to be simplified, I think being overwhelmed with information, I think kind of ensuring that you're simplifying that information as best as possible is quite a big one. There's a lot of, what I would say as well is that there's often very connected psychology biases and principles. So if we look at like being overwhelmed with information, kind of how you solve for that often falls into something about things like progressive disclosure. Like, you wouldn't bring all of the information in at once, because no one wants to see it all at once. They just need to see what's right at any one time. And if people need more information, they'll naturally dive in and try and find that for themselves. So I think, being overwhelmed with data and using something like progressive disclosure is an absolute go-to, especially with any kind of flow onboarding. That is a big one that's seen a lot. We don't want to give someone a huge form to fill out. It's take them through it, give them reasoning, that kind of stuff. I'd say that's a big one. The other one I like looking at is very related to everyday life as well. And this is something for people to think about, is that psychology isn't just about, what you do on digital devices and, how you talk to people. Everyone sees it wherever they go. And I always use this example of when you're in a supermarket and you're walking down a shopping aisle and you're looking at all the shelves. There's a reason why products are put on the shelves the way that they are. And a good psychology bias around that is called the decoy effect. And the decoy effect there is essentially about promoting a very specific item. And on a supermarket shelf, the way that they do it is that they'll have the cheapest products at the bottom, they'll have the most expensive products at the top, and the kind of Goldilocks product is right in the middle. So the decoy effect is essentially kind of using two other examples as a way to draw you into the one you actually want to get to. So they look at a cheap one and they think, oh, you know what, the quality is probably not very good. They look at the expensive one and they think, oh, it's not really worth the money. And they look at that middle one and they think, that's it. That's the one I want. So you can utilize that in many ways. Pricing pages is a great example of that, especially in subscription models. Most companies have free subscriptions for a reason. The one they're actually targeting is the middle one. They don't really expect you to go for the super cheap one or the big one. Super cheap one is just to get you into the middle one. The big one there is for people that just live that product, So yeah, I think that would be the other one. My other match, I would say, is a mixture, and some people get this wrong a little bit sometimes, is priming versus framing. So what I mean by priming and framing is with priming, it's about setting up expectations for what's next. So, if you are going through, say, onboarding is a good example again, say you need 10 screens of information from someone because it's necessary. We need to help people understand that's what's coming up, because sometimes, people will get halfway through a cycle and think, I've had enough of this, I'm going to drop out. If you can preempt that, at least people go into the mindset that there's going to be time invested here. And you can, prime in nice ways too. You can be like, look, we're going to start off talking about this topic, get people into the right mindset so they know what kind of information is going to be needed and how they're going to behave. Then it comes into framing, and framing then is, okay, what do you do about the there and now? So when you're in that screen, how do you frame it to help with perhaps, the value of what that screen is about? How do you make sure they understand why they're giving that information, what value that they're going to get out of giving that information? The framing of that is incredibly important, because, if you just said, right, get started, jump into the next screen and go, give me your email, like everyone looks at that and think, oh, why? What's the point? Yeah. But if you said, thanks for joining us, like, we're going to create a fantastic profile for you that gives you great content, get started, you get into the email, it's like, give us your email and you will get, weekly rewards and all this kind of stuff. Instantly I'm engaged and I feel like, actually, I do want to do this. I'm more likely now to continue with this journey, and I'm more likely to give you my email address. So yeah, so those are kind of the 3 big ones I really like. One last one, just because I love the word, and if any of my past team are watching this, they'll know this one, is the Zeigarnik effect. I just love that word, the Zeigarnik. I'd always try and pronounce it by reading it because it's a hard one. Essentially, what the Zeigarnik effect is that people intuitively want to complete things. It's just a thing. So if you're given a task list, regardless of what that task list is, you want to complete it. You do not like seeing that task list half done, or even 10% done or 75% done. You want to get through it. And that is seen by various different ways of doing it. You can go as simple as a progress bar. I think that's just showing you that you are 25% of the way there. Encouragement to kind of move forwards. And then, with a lot of checklists of, if you're onboarding to a product, it's like, oh, finish your profile by doing these 4 things. Usually you're kind of like, I want to complete these 4 things, because a lot of the time there's also a feeling of, I'm going to get something out of this at the end of this, so why would I not want to do this? And obviously, for all the gamers out there, the Zeigarnik effect is used in everything. Side quests galore. If you're a completist, you're going to go and do every single GTA mission, Zelda mission, whatever it is, by talking to some random people because you want to complete it, essentially. So yeah, that is always a really interesting one too.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yep.
Super quick to on Wookly, I think it's the Zeigarnik effect. Zein Zeigarnik, something like that. I will. Well, I'm sure we'll share a little bit after this as well. But feel free to.
Yeah, we could exactly. We can kind of drop it in. Okay, I think I got it. I could just quickly throw that on the screen if my thumbs move fast enough. Okay, here you go. Is it this?
Yeah, that's
Zygote?
the one.
Yeah.
Love it.
Okay,
Yeah.
go. Okay. Wow,
That's what
this is
trying to pronounce that word is ridiculous.
yeah. Exactly. I have the word. I'll throw it on screen here. I'll just let it tick. But yeah, that was some live production for you guys there. I when you spoke about the sort of information overload and sort of simplification, there's also the case where it's kind of rooted and based in a lot of cultural things or different cultures. So the example that I wanted to bring up was like, if you go to a Japanese train station, there's just signs everywhere. And it's pretty crazy for someone who has not been to Japan, or even if you try to use a ticket machine, there's like, not only are there buttons, but there are like stickers next to the buttons to explain what the button does and all this stuff. And for someone who hasn't been, it's quite daunting. And then connected to that is if you also look at like Chinese websites or Chinese apps, like e-commerce apps, they like I don't know if there's that much white space because it's kind of like they cram a lot of things in. So I think this is connected to the sort of the next topic, which is like, how do you design around behaviors and biases? Where you like, of course, context is always the king. Understanding that first, and then kind of like apply it to the situations that you're in. But yeah, I guess my question is, in that sense, like, how important is it to, I guess, soak up all that context and recognizing behaviors and biases before you actually jump in Figma, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as you were talking about it, there's a website that came to mind from years ago. I think it was a Chinese car dealership site or something like that. I always remember it. It was used a lot in examples like 10 years ago or something. And yeah, I remember it now. The cartoon faces of people everywhere. There was about 100 cars in one page, offers, badges everywhere, right? And I think to that point, I think kind of what is important from a psychological perspective, and another principle to follow as well, is familiarity. And that comes into kind of how do I create this experience that is the right thing to do? Or how do I make sure I'm best considered, like you say, before I go into Figma? So cultural is a really good aspect, because from a familiarity aspect, yes, there are people in certain countries, when they go onto their websites, they expect to see certain things. And those countries know that type of experience works for some people in those countries, that big flashy signs and lots of animated effects like engages people and makes them want to click certain things. And while it might work there, it might not work somewhere else. And they could, and we look at some of those sites, maybe as British or US people, and think, this is crazy. Like, I don't know what I'm looking at. But other people who know those sites well know exactly how to navigate them. So that is all about familiarity. They have grown up with those kind of experiences, and they kind of expect it. Like, it's just the norm for them. So interestingly for them, it's more difficult to create an experience that's far more simplified, because they start to feel like things are missing. And it does lean on another, actually, by taking away too much information in various different ways. you end up having the user ask more questions about what's going on. So yeah, I'd love to see a user test of someone in the Chinese market trying to use the most simplistic app, because yeah, I could see it being different. But yeah, to your point, yeah, how do you make sure you really understand what's going on before you go in? You understand the biases of different people, cultural for sure. If you are a global product, you need to understand the familiarity of experiences of those different cultures. And it's not just about, we've got to make sure the typography fits because certain languages are longer than others, that kind of stuff. It's the experience itself. It's very different. And that really does go down to the mentality, and that's the psychology of those people from different cultures can be quite different. So yeah, it's, as much as we love to say psychology is almost like a one size fits all, most people think like this. When you do start to boil it down to cultures, it does differentiate it. So it's good to challenge yourself with that. Yeah, and you can only do that through research as well. Yeah, as much as you can lean on psychology websites for just a generalized view, research specifically with those markets and understand the differences in their needs without even showing them anything. There's sometimes no point in giving them a screen because it's going to bias them in a different way. Ask them a question, see how they respond. It will be different by culture. And I think that's the great learning first, before you work out what's the Goldilocks of all those different needs into one.
Right. Have you, are there any war stories around trying to communicate biases to stakeholders and for them just being like, yeah, but I don't really care, like we should do this anyway, but then you're like, oh, but really, like, like this could go really wrong, like this could be really bad. Any war stories around that, or something like against
I'd say that, yeah, I'd say like what's happened for sure in the past. I mean, definitely when I was a much more junior designer, and in your mind, what's right, and you're going to people. The thing we often find is, especially when you're talking to stakeholders, are all about the figures and they're all about the money side of things, and you're trying to talk to them about psychology, and it's not really getting through to them. And they said, look, can we not just do something simple here and just let's see if it creates the uplift, that kind of thing. That's where I've always found the problem, I think, kind of growing through my career. The moment that changed, I think, was when I really learned psychology and learned how to communicate the understanding of that. And the thing that I often say to people, as I kind of said earlier, is that psychology is kind of common sense. Like when you boil it, when you kind of, simplify it into a way that everybody speaks, you take away the scientific jargon, and you explain it in a way of, like we did with the being overwhelmed with how much information there is. Keeping it simple to that, we can say, look, in general, studies have found that people, need specific piece of information. It's got to be relevant. If there's too much information, it doesn't work. People don't know where to click, that kind of stuff. As long as you're putting it into plain English, generally stakeholders understand. We did a project at my last company. We did a little project with Trainline, which was really nice. Lovely team that we worked with over at Trainline, and they just wanted to understand kind of, we started talking about behavioral psychology and how we were using it at Global, and sorry, not Trainline, TfL, that's a different company. And they wanted to understand, how we were using psychology and how they could use it in their product. And when we presented it, we use a bit of the jargon in there, but when we spoke to them in person about it, we just kept to the plain English. And the important thing that we did do as well is that we associated it to an everyday thing in life. So like I said, the supermarket story, when you are in there, how do you normally pick a product? Do you go low? Do you go high? Or do you go middle? Most people go middle. And, that's the kind of winning one. You're kind of betting there's going to be that stakeholder in the room that always goes top shelf. But, that as long as you're associating it to something that's understandable in your everyday life, it takes them out of the mindset of specifically looking at the product and thinking about this as if they would tackle any other situation of a similar context, that is where I've seen the win. So yeah, it's war stories is definitely always just, it's down to the misunderstanding, if anything.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah. Yeah, the minute you kind of spout like jargon and designs or psychology only terms, you've lost 90% of
Yeah,
the room, right? Unless you're speaking to a bunch of designers or psychology geeks. Like, it's just know your audience, right?
yeah.
Yeah, makes
Yeah,
tons of sense.
exactly. You
Yeah.
learn this as you grow as a designer, right? Like I remember so many times being told, Ben, you talk so much fluff. Like, you tell a really great point and then you go off on this massive tangent and it gets completely lost. And I go on a tangent because one, yeah, we're passionate, right? Like we want to talk about all the great stuff of it. But also like what I'm trying to get across is all my knowledge. And I'm like, oh, but I know these words. This is so good. They don't care. They don't care I know these words. They just want me to get to the point, right? So yeah, you just learn to say, right, what's going to hit that simple message I can give them that relates to them and helps them understand why this is a good idea.
Yeah. It's funny because we do all, like, as designers, I think we try our best to cater our message to the people that we speak to, we pitch to, we try to persuade. However, sometimes uh, the stakeholders don't do the same, right?
Yeah,
They will just say, like, I don't know, gross profit or retention, and then maybe for some junior designers, they're like, what are they talking about? What does it mean? So, but in general, I think good teams try to keep it to a level where everybody in the room can understand and are on the same page, and that's also just yeah, and from your workshops today, you guys have probably done that as well, right? Lots of different
yeah,
stakeholders and designers in the room. Just try to be like, okay, well, what are we talking about? What's the simplest way to say this? And then move forward from there. I wanted to
exactly.
go back to this question that Alison asked, because we said to understand the biases and the behaviors, research is probably a great place to start, right? Start asking questions, getting in the room before you do anything, and start just talking to people, right? But are there any sort of strategies or things that you and your team do or have done to sort of like filter out these behaviors and actions and needs and wants and biases?
Yeah, good question. I suppose what I'd preface that with is good research, I think, is also informed research. I think, yeah, it's great to just go and start speaking to customers, but that takes time. And the reality of it is a lot of teams don't have time, right? And they don't have the budget. So I always advise, and as part of any kind of discovery plan I put together with teams, it's always pull together what we know first. Like actually what knowledge is out there, whether that's through the competitor analysis side of things, whether that's through our own kind of past research insights, or even just internal experience insights. People have their own knowledge from past work. Like pull that together. And psychology essentially is one of those things. Like there's plenty of websites like myself with UXologist where there's a whole database of studies that have already been run, and they generally talk to the majority of people these all fit to. So it's always a way that if you want to see if something's going to work, if you want to get something out quick, you can base it on some of those psychological facts and get that out there. I think then it's the case of, okay, look, when we are considering psychology within the context of this product, talking with cultural aspects as well, like if this is something that is going to specific markets, we do need to make sure that that psychology bias or principle still is applicable to that culture. So what I'm saying really there is kind of like, actually narrow down your research a bit. If there's an area where you don't think that's going to land with a certain culture or a certain use case, research around that. It's good to kind of be a little bit more precise to get something more focused in terms of feedback, rather than having a massive interview that can go off in any tangent and you end up having completely different results to every single one. So frame your interviews, I think is a big one. In terms of, I suppose, general strategy, that's part of it, I'd say, is definitely just informing it and making sure you've got a focused interview session to start off with. It's great to speak to people straight away. The next step, really, if you really want to get buy-in, is to quantify those understandings. So you've had your focused interview sessions. You've got, maybe it's only 5 people, but, you said 3 out of 5 people all said something similar. It kind of goes in line perhaps with this psychology thinking we were thinking, or this other insight that we found. Quantify it with, it could be surveys, it's a really simple thing. If you're lucky, you've got access to your customer database, you can send a survey out directly to them. So you've got the most contextual feedback possible, get it through that way. So yeah, I would say inform, learn, quantify is my general way of looking at it.
I love it. Yeah, awesome. That's a really sort of easy to understand framework. We spoke about, or you just mentioned something that makes me think of this other next topic, but I forgot it. So the segue died with my bad memory. So anyway, I'm just no, I had it on the tip of my tongue and then it just died. But anyway, segue fail. But I wanted to speak about sort of these small tweaks that could have potentially a huge impact on a product experience. Like, for example, I think, conversion rates is always like a metric that a lot of businesses focus on, quite rightly so. Have you seen, like, I mean, what are some of the small tweaks that are kind of like no-brainers for product teams to kind of like at least try to turn the knob a little bit to move a certain metric? Have you seen in your experience?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I suppose if we think about that end goal being conversion, right, kind of what we're trying to look at is those steps in between to get there. So to step someone through, like I said earlier about kind of the priming and the framing, I think as long as you are just giving very clear direction of expectations of what to come, that helps people move through. And that can just be for copy, like very simple copy that's more guided and emotional, right? Maybe it's a massive journey. If you want to be slightly humorous about it, you can say, sorry, we're going to need 5 minutes, but there's huge value at the end of this, and this is going to be great. Like, be honest and just and prime people to go through it. It's great. Again, the framing is important. I think, just considering, right, within the screen, we want the user to do this. Is that obvious? Just kind of looking at that screen and understanding, is it clear what people actually need to do here? And the simple thing really there is, like we said earlier, is simplifying that information and looking at progressive disclosure. Like, at that very time and that point of the journey, what is the information someone needs to inform the step they're going to take? Just give them that. It's as simple as that. Then you can give them the rest of it. And then the other super small tweak is anchoring. And I think the classic thing with anchoring, so what I mean by anchoring is also another phrase of signposting. So is making sure that people can see where it is you're trying to get them to. So is that a CTA, or is that a big quote that you want people to read, that kind of stuff? Old school ways of thinking was, let's change the color of the button and all this kind of stuff. Like, yeah, it kind of works, but it's also about placement. It's about, relevancy to the things that it's positioned next to. Like, if you're considering where you want someone to click, it's got to be something that feels intentional, not a mistake, not something they need to hunt for. And that is really thinking about, if you're showcasing your value proposition, something very simply, like, put your action there straight away. Like, you should be selling people by that value proposition, and they should be pretty much bought in. If you then hide the button further down because you're then trying to add all the additional trust and things like that, people end up giving up because they're kind of like, this is too much information. You've lost me now. I've even forgotten what you were trying to propose in that first bit. So it's those tweaks like that. It's really keep it simple is, standard KISS principle for any design. Keep it simple, stupid, right? Like, that is the case. That is where psychology works the best. So yeah, I think if ever you look at something and think, have we said too much? You probably have, I think, is the answer.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So with conversion rates, it's always a sort of hypothesis and experimentation, right? So you don't
Yeah.
necessarily know it's going to work, but you're like, it could work. We should bet on this. Have you had, or how have you sort of navigated with developers? Like, it's worth doing this, guys. Like, there could be a decent lift, but I don't have the data to back it at the moment, but we'll know after we try it. Like, what's that struggle there for you like?
Yeah, it's funny. Someone actually asked me about this today. Someone that's slightly more junior and kind of had that same question of, I go to developers and sometimes they push back on stuff, and I feel like I have to get someone more senior to like back my case. Yeah, it's a struggle. Like, it's a struggle for a lot of people. My answer a lot of the time is build trust. I think with engineers, that's the thing. Like, if you've just gone to them with a solution without even involving them up front and getting their ideas, you haven't bought that trust in from the engineers. And when you build that trust, you can eventually go to them with anything and they'll be like, love it, let's do it. Why not? Because they trust your process, right? I think is a thing. I suppose from the data aspect, I mean, going to them to kind of say, look, there's reasons why this is the right thing to do. If you don't have the data, it is about leaning on the effort side of things. Like, it's the compromise part. It's like, here's what we're aiming to do. Here's what we're proposing we do in order to achieve that. It is getting that feedback in that session of them set of like, actually, what is the most achievable thing? Because the reason developers a lot of the time say no is because it's too much effort. Like, it's like, we're supposed to deliver this in a week. That's going to take us 3 weeks. Like, the question as a designer you need to ask is, what could take a week? Like, how do we boil this down, right? And get something that's iterative. So yeah, without data, it's hard, but it is about leaning on collaboration and getting that kind of feedback from developers so that you're aligned pretty much.
Yeah. That makes total sense. So let's go to some questions that the folks have been asking, and we can see if we can try and answer all of them. So guys, again, drop your questions in the comments. So we have this question from Alison again. Are there any resources that would give frameworks or philosophy related to progressive disclosure? I believe your website, UXologist, has a bunch of stuff like this.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so with the UXologist.com, there is a whole page devoted to progressive disclosure. What I try and go into is give an insight, I suppose, in terms of what progressive disclosure is, kind of what good progressive disclosure looks like versus what can go wrong, essentially, as well, which is good. What I've also done is I do link to a lot of case studies that I've done where I pointed out progressive disclosure. So it does help give you some examples of how to use that in practice. To the framework, though, to be honest, I think that's a really good idea. I think I haven't seen anywhere necessarily that specifically calls out how to do progressive disclosure over an experience with various different types of scenarios, because it is very contextual. Like, what you do as progressive disclosure is completely based on the scenario, the experience, that kind of thing. But yeah, how to take someone through step by step could be a great idea. Otherwise, yeah, there's lots of information on the site. Other sites available, of course.
Perfect. I'm sure the CIA are pretty kick-ass at progressive disclosure. Maybe there's something on their side. Need to know basis only.
It takes me back to like old school videos where it comes up at the front like, you will be arrested if you copy this. Like, that is serious progressive disclosure. Like, just so you're aware, if this happens, like, this will happen.
Right. We have a question around research and language barriers. What kind of design research can we conduct if our users, business stakeholders, and designers have a language barrier?
Yeah, really good question. I haven't seen this, I suppose, a lot personally myself. There have been a few scenarios where I have definitely had this. one, I think, if we consider, like we said earlier, that if our product goes to different markets, yeah, there's going to be markets where we don't necessarily fully understand the culture and may not even speak the language. I think it's important in those instances, if you do feel like there is a market fit within that region, you do need someone really that can speak that language and that can translate the research piece you're doing so that an interview can happen in that language. I think there's an importance there. But I think also just internally, if there's a language barrier with stakeholders, for instance, then yeah, words might be an issue, but visualization is, kind of something visual is a common language, right? And the obvious examples of things like sign language, like that exists to kind of overcome language barriers. So within design, if we think about how visually can we get feedback on this, we often see, low fidelity prototypes is a great way to do this, in that, old school paper prototype on the desk, just chunk up all the little blocks and things and just, have a very simple question that is easier to understand and provide that very simple task. And just having someone move things around visually is a lot easier to kind of help them understand what to do and why they would do certain things. The reasoning why they choose that pattern is then something that you can kind of, it's going to take time. It's not going to be easy for them to explain it, but at least if you can at least get them to build something visually that they feel is right. You don't need words, you could just have pictures, a little bit of, placeholder text, that kind of thing. As long as they know the context and they know what you're going to trying to achieve with each of those blocks, the visual movement is a good test to do.
Yeah, I really like that. And as you were saying, sort of this visual component, there's an exercise in the design sprint. So now I'm talking about ideation, where it's literally heat map voting, right? Where you're putting stickers at things that you like in the room, and you can actually see, a collection of stickers over like interesting features, right? So if you're co-creating with your users, then maybe that exercise, you don't need to speak, you can see it visually, right? And everybody in the room is doing it. So that could be another way to sort of, make that sort of progress visual, right? Like the things that you're doing together. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you're asking like where would you click, that's such an easy thing. Everyone could just put a post-it there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess, when was your were you fascinated with psychology before design, or were you fascinated with design first, or how did this happen for you?
Yeah, so design, I would say, come first. I think I grew up very creative, kind of one of those annoying people that always kind of knew what they wanted to do. But yeah, design has been my life, right? That's kind of been a big thing of it. Psychology, I think, just came, I suppose, progressively to me, in terms of like, the more I understood about, users and the interest that I had in them. I started out very much visual. As a UI designer, I did graphic design before that, back in a time where UI UX was a completely separate thing. And then the more I worked with UX, I understood kind of, okay, yeah, this is really interesting. We need to understand how users think about this in order to create the best visuals, right? And becoming a product designer, that becomes even more needed. I think I did naturally become just generally interested in the way that others think. I think it's important also, I think, as I became more senior, became a manager, became a leader, it was important for me to understand my staff, kind of how to empathize with them. And so just generally trying to work out, how do I best talk with people, and how do I kind of really understand their real needs by kind of saying the right things and stuff like that. It just started to sway me into that, like, understanding of, this is really interesting. Like, everybody thinks differently in some ways, but actually there's this really ground level of, there's certain things that everyone does exactly the same. And the more I saw of that, and then started to see, there were websites coming out, a couple of years ago, like Growth Design was a great one, everyone uses. Nelson Norman, and everyone uses as well. They talk about these things a lot, and the more I read into it, the more I got interested in it. And yeah, that was what really did it for me.
That's awesome. Yeah, you're kind of like, as you're working in design, peeling back those layers of the onion, and you're like, wow, this stuff
Exactly.
is so deep, right? Like you're just like, whoa, where does
Yeah.
how deep does the rabbit hole actually go? So that sounds amazing.
Yeah, exactly that. You get way more contextual. I was talking to someone in our team who used to be in customer service, and that was interesting because we should speak to customer service a lot as well. Big thing for design that we miss out. But knowing those stories, the personal stories, that's where it's really interesting. Like you learn the exact scenarios. They were talking today about someone that unfortunately had a horrible situation at home within their family. It was very personal, and didn't know what to do. And the customer service agent basically spent the entire day with them, just helping them solve this and getting through this horrible matter. And kind of seeing someone in such a kind of traumatic experience and how they think about things differently to how someone else thinks about things is very interesting. And I think that's where we go back to that thing earlier of, yeah, sure, psychology kind of hits the majority, but you do need to do that research to understand those more specific scenarios and use cases, especially the vulnerable ones. That's where it gets different too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, tell us what you're trying to do with UXologist, and I'll give you as much time as you need, but tell the folks about it. Feel free to plug away, and I'll just hide from the stage. Stage is yours.
Definitely. Cheers. So the UXologist is a company I started up last year. I think out of, I suppose, need for myself to start off with. I think there's a lot of great resources out there, but there's a lot of things I was missing. I think, the more specific examples, and the bigger piece I was really missing was actually how is psychology linked? There's so many different principles, biases, but as I studied them, there are very clear links between them. And kind of a point that Chris was saying earlier about kind of, how do you use psychology to inform your discussions with other stakeholders, with engineers, etc. It's one thing to just talk about one principle, but actually if you can understand how a few are related, you're able to kind of really show like the much bigger impact that psychology can have, because it is a domino effect, right? And that's what I've really done with the UXologist, is that the resource really goes into that more detail. And I think, I've done a load of case studies on there as well. So it's really helpful to just understand where in different experiences people are, doing certain psychology, or where they might be missing certain psychology. So it's really interesting in that sense. And my bigger aim, I think, with the UXologist is to continue to educate, and there'll be courses as well at some point in the future to help people better understand behaviors of people in general, to improve their design process. And off the back of it, I can't stop creating other things. So I'm creating another app at the moment as well that's specifically around the health side of things. So it's a great format to take my learnings of what I put into that site, and also from the community, what I get back from others, and put it into a product that really, really works. And ultimately, as with me, it helps my work as well here at Experian. And I hope that for anyone else using it as a resource, it can help improve their products and improve their growth as a designer. That's what's most important. I love seeing people grow. So if that's what this really helps, amazing. That's my spiel.
That's awesome. I'm bought in, man. I'm like looking at it in the background, just kind of be like, well, there's so much here. And it's so much here. I bet your team also uses this quite a lot, right? I bet they refer to it quite a lot.
So I'm just introducing it to my team at the moment. My last team, I love seeing, like, when you can see people that have logged in. I love seeing people from my old team still logging in today. It's great. It's really nice to see I've left something with them that is still being used.
Yeah. So guys, you got to check it out. It's the uxologist.com. And you can scan that QR code here. I'll leave a link in the description. I think I've done that already, but I'll make sure it's there after this. And you go check out that. And there's a bunch of resources like case studies, psychology cocktail, the AI shaker guide. Tell us about that.
Yeah, the AI thing. I mean, I love a bit of AI, but yeah, I mean that's one of the things, like, is trying to find the right information. I've created this AI shaker, which essentially people can select certain scenarios that they're looking to add conversion or growth in, and it will kind of give you a bit of a generated spiel based of all of the information I put into it, of what would really work, move the needle for that specific circumstance. So yeah, it's a really interesting one. It's AI. It's not always 100% perfect, but it's a great guidance piece anyway.
Yeah, and I think one of the things with, like, let's just say you're trying to improve conversion, it's just like you just need a list of things that you can experiment with. You need to know what the levers are and to pull it. Otherwise, like, you can't just make it up. It's not like you're changing, again, a color of a button, right? Like, that's the obvious one. Like, why would I do that? What are the other sort of deep underlying factors? So that sounds really, really cool, man.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. Guys, check this out, and Ben, I wanna thank you for your time in the middle of your day as well. So I appreciate that, and would love to have you back on soon when the course is out, or you have something going on that you want to share with
Absolutely.
the audience. So, but thank you for your time, and yeah, really, really enjoyed it, man.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me. It's been great chat, and I'm still jealous of your background compared to mine. I mean, your location compared to mine is way better.
Yeah, it's rainy season, but yes, exactly. It's still tropical and the food is great. So there's nothing to complain about. All right. So I will take you off stage and wrap this up. But thanks again, man.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks everyone for joining.
See ya. Okay. Again, guys, the UXologist.com, and you can find a ton of stuff here. Case studies, psychology cocktails, AI shaker. So for example, if you just click on the biases to try this week, fear of missing out, everybody knows FOMO, and you can go into it. I'm not sharing my screen now, but I just want to walk you through like what's there. Ben's done a great job to sort of connect these psychological principles with something else, right? Best paired with, it says progressive disclosure, nudge. And then there's the study, the results, what is best paired with, and then what to avoid the pairings with. And then, of course, there's a case study based on this fear of missing out, who's using it. And the case study here, Ben has written, is about Netflix, how Netflix fuels binge habits through discovery. So it's like the principle, but actually very practical for you to like look at a company doing it and kind of implement it in your own product, or experiment with your own product as well. And maybe your portfolio, maybe you can experiment some of the psychology principle on your own portfolio, right? A product that you can control and kind of like tinker with. So I want to wrap this up, guys. The next LinkedIn Live is on October the 1st. I will be in Malaysia speaking at FuseCon 2025 the day after. So I'll be there, and we are going to talk about. Let me just put that here. How to convert with content design. And I'll be if you guys have been on LinkedIn, you must have seen Nick's content with content design. And we're going to talk about three things: how to create a winning brand identity, how to create content to attract the right people, and how to generate leads with content as a designer. Nick is he founded an agency, a graphic designer in background, but now he really focuses on helping founders with designing content that generates leads and ultimately converts. So if that's something you're thinking about, maybe you're a freelancer and you're like, okay, I'm sharing stuff online, not really getting any clients, this will probably be one of the things that you should not miss. So if you wanted to listen to that, go ahead and scan this QR code, if I can bring it on, and subscribe to get notified at live.uxplaybook.org. Again, you can scan this, but I don't think I have anything else on my list. So thank you guys for joining, and I hope you enjoyed it. I will see you on October the 1st. And with that, bye. This is the design of everyday people.
It sound right, boy.
This is the design of everyday people.
It sound right.